Um, so what we kind of ended up doing yesterday, by accident, was we discussed quite deeply food. We ended up going quite deeply into food yesterday, um, and how when it's Ramadan time and it's iftar time, sometimes we kind of lose our consciousness a little bit around the food which we're eating, and what happens at iftar time. And there's different reasons for this, but in our culture, it's very very common. So what we had a challenge yesterday, which was that at iftar time. So when we actually break our fast, try and only break your fast with things which are directly. When you look at the food that you're eating, you can directly tell how it's been created by Allah, as opposed to like it being some kind of mix up of random fried things which you have no idea, why they even exist in the human diet. Does that make sense to everyone? Does everyone remember this yesterday? So this was the challenge that we had. That when we break it, Dr. Ramadhan, assalamu alaikum. How are you, man? we've got the health people on board as well, man. We had a challenge yesterday, Dr. Ramli. I think you were probably at work yesterday. But we had a challenge, which was, when we have iftar and we actually break our fast, the challenge was to, that moment we actually break fast. So then Hamdan, now I asked everyone, how does everyone break their fast, basically? And then everyone gave their own little answers. And then Hamdan said that he has a little section where he eats like dates and fruit and things. And then after that, he like prays Maghrib and stuff, and then after that he comes back and actually has a meal, which I thought was quite a sensible, simple solution to I think a lot of our problems. Which is just to have that period of time where, despite being allowed to eat, you're only eating things which are like healthy, so to speak. And even in terms of fruit, if you're having too much fruit, that can also be that can end up being a bit of a problem as well. But I think, broadly speaking, just keeping things close to the way which Allah created them. And I think this was an important point. So, did everyone understand what I meant by eating foods which look similar to the way that Allah created them? Or did that just go over everyone's head? Oh, okay. That's good, man. That's good. So what that means is, for example, like when Allah creates a food, for example, like Allah creates a lot of fruit. Yeah, so for example, if you have a tree in your garden, like I've got a pear tree in my garden. So what happens then is you don't have to do anything. You don't have to fry it. You don't have to give it any hormones or anything. Like it just grows by itself. So every summer pears will start growing on the tree. So this is Allah's way of growing food. And obviously Allah created the planet, He created the trees, He created everything. And He also created the human body. Yeah. So when we bring this awareness that Allah's created us and He's also created the systems of food growing around the world, I think that's quite powerful to keep that in mind. So when you realize that when Allah allows a tree to grow and the fruit to come from the tree, or if we're looking at lettuce and salads kind of thing, then it probably doesn't grow on a tree. It might grow from the ground, and you have to kind of pull it out the ground in some cases, or it might just some of them are just on small little bushes. But regardless of what the case is, you can usually tell when something's been created by Allah. So the challenge was that when it's time to break your fast, you try and only use something which, when you look at it, you can actually tell that it's been created by Allah. So fruit or dates or vegetables like salads and things like that. Trying to have that, and before you go into anything more heavy or more kind of strange and different, you try and leave a little gap. So I think the challenge was to pray Maghrib Salah before eating anything which hasn't been created by Allah. So that was yesterday's challenge. I'm not sure whether anyone bothered to have a go at it. Did anyone have a go at it from the people that are actually here? Oh, mashallah, that's really good, man. Alhamdulillah. Mashallah, man, that's really good, man. Alhamdulillah. I can tell from the response, a lot of cultures do actually have that. alhamdulillah, built within it. Some mosques even do that actually, that they'll have like dates and water. I know in Leicester in IDA, that place, a lot of us we went there. They do just dates and water. Then you pray Maghrib, and then like it's a massive mosque in Leicester, and they're like 700-800 people who usually go there for itikaf, for the seclusion at the end of the month. So they just give dates and water, and then you pray Maghrib and you make dua, and you continue with your worship, and then like maybe half an hour later you go for some kind of food. But yeah, man, because what that does is it then gets you aware of how your Maghrib feels with just dates and water, which is very, very. MashaAllah. Yeah, man. I think just that awareness is really there. I think the point of having the exercise, the point of me even saying it, is just so that everyone has that bit of awareness. To some. Sorry, I muted everyone. I didn't mean to cut anyone off. That was just because there was some background noise. If you want to unmute yourself and say anything, you're more than welcome to. But the reason for that was to kind of, if you're looking at the slide, was to get that awareness of how food actually affects, even the way that you can pray, even the way that you pray afterwards. So that's really, really important. And then, even then, you'll notice that food doesn't just affect your soul, but also it will affect your concentration, and it will affect the amount you can be bothered to actually bring any energy there, bring any focus there, which is quite important. But that was just yesterday's lesson. That was just a brief recap of yesterday's lesson and how we kind of pushed everyone to have that challenge of bringing that awareness. Because then when you go and pray your Maghrib Salah and you've not eaten, I guess the challenge is for those people who tend to break their fast with fried food or with something a little bit naughty, I guess. I guess that's where the challenge lies. So if you're used to kind of breaking your fast, or then maybe with a date, but also with fried food, the challenge there would pray your Maghrib Salah and see how that feels when you haven't actually put any kind of dangerous food in your body, as I like to call it. But yeah, man, I think we've got a lot of people joining, man. Let me just say, Assalamu alaikum, Alpha. Good to have you, man. And Madhu's here as well, man. Assalamu alaikum, Madhu. Abdullah is here, man. This is the African Abdullah. Abdullah, assalamu alaikum, man. How are you, man? What's going on? Long time, bro. A long time. How's your... I know a lot of the school kids have a lot of work from school nowadays, man. They've got a good excuse. They got fasting. Sorry, what are you saying, Abdullah? MashaAllah. Do you ever do any work? MashaAllah. So, good to have you, man. MashaAllah. I'm glad you made it. How's your dad doing, man? Is he alright? Alhamdulillah, man. Oh, okay. Chalo, may Allah make it easy for you, man. Good to have you here, man. So that's the other Abdullah. Who else have joined? Abdul Hafiz is here, mashallah, from Malden. Nadeem's here. Assalamu alaikum, Nadeem. How are you, man? TV Sosh. Alhamdulillah, man. Wa alaikum salam, Abdul Hafiz. Good to have you, man. No worries, man. No worries. We're all trying to connect. We're all trying to connect to Allah as well. So we're all trying to connect to Allah. We're trying to connect to each other. Trying to connect to our own spirit as well to some extent, man. It's a complex world, isn't it? It's true, man. Shehzad, assalamu alaikum, Shehzad, man. Good to have you as well, man. Always good to have you. Chalo. Anyway, man. So that was just a quick recap of yesterday's lesson, yesterday's little challenge which we had. And today, inshallah, I just want to go forward, starting off with taqwa, which is what we're kind of focusing on throughout every one of our lessons, and how taqwa applies to our consumption. And then we'll finish off with looking at how taqwa applies to our everyday life. And we'll finish off maybe, depending on how much you guys engage and how long this takes, we'll finish off with a bit of Quran. So we're going to start off with just taqwa, quick recap of taqwa. Then how taqwa applies specifically to consumption, to the things that we take in. And then what that actually looks like in our everyday life. So these are the three things we're going to try and go through, inshallah. So just quickly recapping on taqwa in itself, and I want everyone to deepen this understanding every time. Taqwa is very, very important, man, the way that we understand it. Do any of you guys want to share anything? And when you're sharing, if you guys are going to share, I want you specifically to share something which has deepened your understanding of taqwa. So maybe this year by coming to these classes, or maybe listening to lectures from other scholars or whatever, anything about taqwa which has come up which maybe kind of wasn't there before. It's on the screen anyway, man. But if anyone wants to put it in there in your own words, I think it's always useful to give it a go, give it a shot. Just trying to explain what taqwa is and how we're working towards it in any way. G people. Anyone? Um, mm, mm, mashallah. That's good, man. That's true, man. That's really important because that kind of encapsulates the whole thing, I think. I think if you want to put it in another way, like other people would probably say it's realizing that we're all on a journey, as opposed to none of us are at our destination, which is really important. So I think when you look at the tree, it's like it's perfect in its imperfection, and it's the same with all of us. Even if we're now consultants and are managing teams, we're all still working on everything. Like we all have our own little role which we play in the world. Some of us are husbands, some of us are fathers, some of us are team managers, some of us are imams, some of us are children, like some of us are sons and daughters to our parents, and we all play actually a big role in our family, and in broader terms we play a big role in the world. And even though sometimes we may play like a more significant role, sometimes a less significant role, every one of those roles has its effects. And sometimes it might not be, we might think that, I'm meant to be like a son and taking responsibility, or I'm meant to be a team manager and I'm meant to take this responsibility. But like when you look back on it, like everything will have its little imperfections. And every time we communicate, it might have its imperfections. But I think sometimes the perfection is within the imperfections, and like when we're contributing, for example, to the people around us, I think we learn the quickest when we just within our imperfections trying to help other people as well, man. But yeah, Jazakallah Hamdan, that was a really strong share, man. I think everyone will kind of resonate with that as well, to that extent, because it really encapsulates the whole idea of being aware that we're not really in control and Allah's the one. So on the screen I've got a couple of things which helps us understand taqwa in two main ways. So I want to have taqwa, and whenever you think of taqwa, we have two aspects. Yeah. So you have a mindset, and you have more of a physical. So mindset is kind of you can't really hold that. Does that make sense? And then there's you can't hold either of them. But then there's the actual action, which is a bit more tangible. Does that make sense? So number one is the mindset, and one of the key things about a taqwa mindset is that we realize that Allah's always there, Allah's watching us. And that gives us the awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in terms of mindset, what's important when it comes to a taqwa mindset is definitely to have a growth mindset. Because I think we covered this quite deeply, but we always have two mindsets as human beings. You can either have a fixed mindset, which is like, I was born like this, and I have this many skills, I have this athletic ability, I have this physical ability, I have this spiritual ability, I have this ability to communicate, and this is just the way I am. Or you can be like, okay, this is how I communicate at the moment, but if I don't know, bring some consciousness here, if I realize that, okay, this is how I speak at the moment, but I can actually improve this, I can enhance this, I can grow in terms of the way which I communicate with other people. In the same way, in terms of my character, in terms of my integrity, at the moment I have this much, but I can make it better. In terms of my spirituality and my connection with Allah and my awareness of Allah, At the moment, it might kind of go up and down and fluctuate, but I can actually slowly bring more attention towards it, so that so that it's always growing. So that's the mindset, and having that growth mindset of actually developing our life and our awareness of Allah. And then, as a result of that mindset, we end up with certain actions which we do, and that's actually on a daily basis, not just following what we've always done. So I guess in terms of the first one, the awareness is to make sure we've got a growth mindset. And in terms of action, a nice little saying is, if you always do what you've always done, then you'll always get what you've always got. So that's important for changing the things that we do, because if we always eat a certain thing for iftar, and we think this is just what happens in my life every day, and it's out of my control, then we'll always kind of keep the health that we've always had. And I guess that's the same with all consumption, which we'll come on to. But in the same with our relationship with Allah, if we don't bring a heightened awareness to it, if we don't think about it in a different way, if we don't bring more attention towards it, then it will probably stay the way that it is. So I think that's really important, that we're actually able. This is where the power kind of comes to us. That we as Muslims were actually able to make a small change in our lives. Maybe practice reciting the Quran with a bit more depth. Maybe do a gratitude exercise every day. Maybe think about what do we actually make dua for every day. And when you think about these things, then suddenly we notice that we stop getting what we've always got. And now suddenly du'as have a different effect on you. Gratitude has a different effect on you. Your prayer connects you in a different way. Does that make sense to everyone? So number one is just the awareness of Allah, and then that awareness allows you to make the change in your life, which will start off with a small change, but it allows you to actually make that change in your life. So that's taqwa. And the reason we're talking about taqwa is because of this verse of the Quran, which is on the screen right now, which we, I think every year, even last year, we probably, there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat, man. Even last year, it's just everyone saying assalamu alaikum, mashallah. Okay, thank you. Wa alaikum assalam, everyone. But the thing is, every year, every Imam will talk about this verse of the Quran, that the reason we have fasting, the reason we control ourselves, is so that we attain this taqwa, is so that we get this awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now today I want you to apply this taqwa to consumption, because the reason I'm focusing on consumption is because if you look at this verse, for those of you that are concentrating, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. What's that word? Alaykumus siyam. The word Ramadan isn't mentioned here. Allah speaks about siyam. Siyam is the physical act of actually abstaining from food and water and something else as well. And to abstain from those three things, to actually physically abstain from putting food in your mouth and to drinking water, that in itself is the action which gets you taqwa, according to this verse. So by controlling your consumption, you're going to increase your awareness of Allah. That in itself is what allows you to become more aware of Allah. So I think that's quite important to keep that in mind. There's actually the consumption itself, as opposed to Ramadan and all of these, based on this verse here. Does that make sense? That's why I wanted to bring some attention towards the actual consumption, which is the food and the drink that we have, but just extending it to everything that we consume as human beings on a daily basis. So obviously in Ramadan we bring such a heightened awareness towards whatever we put in our mouth. Like nothing else, like never before, we bring this awareness to what we put in our mouth. So number one is obviously food. We just completely stop putting food in our mouth for a certain number of hours in the day. And then there's fluids, which we completely stop as well. And also in terms of consumption, there's two or three other things which we also consume. One of them is information, and this is, I think nowadays it can be just as dangerous as food and like eating. Just like overeating can destroy your body, over binging on information can destroy your mind, and your spirit and your body. Because they all come together, man. Your mind, body and spirit, they link. When you're messing up your mind and stressing yourself out, your body's going to feel that effect. Those of you that work in the NHS will probably be more aware of the statistics which directly relate to this, of how that when somebody's stressed out, that can mean that they're ending up in hospital. When somebody's out of touch with their spirit, that means that they're ending up in hospital. And so these things come together very, very closely, man. So the reason I bring information up, and this is probably something the Prophet ﷺ or the Quran didn't mention as much, is because nowadays we live in a time where we all have these things called mobile phones. And they weren't around at the time. Like at the time of the Prophet, Google wasn't invented. So all the information in the world hadn't actually been organized. So now the problem is that we live in a world where we can, we sometimes think that we don't have control on what information we choose to allow into our system. Yeah, even though we do. And this problem is very often caused by the way news is portrayed to us as we grow up. Like, especially in our culture, man. Like, we grow up and we taught, like, the most important thing you can do with your time after, all your bare necessities is to watch the news. And if somebody's watching the news, if one of the elders of the household is watching the news, like, everyone else has to be quiet because this is a very important action. So I'm talking about, slightly elder times. So this is pre-smartphone era. Now we've got smartphones. Now, obviously, I have some control on my phone, but my wife. So with her phone, when I look at her phone by accident, she for some reason has all the news coming in, like how many people have died from the coronavirus today, and that's comes up as a notification on her phone, and I'm like, why is this going on? So obviously, I change her settings and stuff when all that happens. But I know with a lot of people, they don't think there's anything wrong with binging on the news all day. Like, every time you pick up your phone, the amount of times we pick up our phone is too much in the first place. But then when you pick it up and you're getting the news about how many people are dying and what's going wrong and how, we all need to start panicking, when you have that information, like, even just thinking about it now, I feel like I need to go to the hospital. But I mean, watching too much news is really not good. And I think sometimes in the age that we live in, we think that we don't have control on what information we choose to allow into our life. Whereas we do. Like, it's completely up to you. Just like you choose what you put in your mouth, you choose what you put in your brain as well. You choose what you choose to learn about, what information. Like, if you choose to become an expert on politics and the news and what's going wrong in the world, then that's it's a conscious decision which you make. So I think it's important to bring awareness to that because it's Ramadan. I know many of the people that I work with, some of the clients who stay in touch with me, I do definitely recommend this. But you actually spend some time away from your phone. Maybe fix a 4-hour block every day where you're not allowed to touch your phone. Just switch it off, and not when you're sleeping. Like, whilst you're awake, trying to block out 2, 3, maybe start with 5 minutes. Like, I actually have some clients who I work with, and they fail. Like, I say, why don't you turn your phone off? Or just turn your phone off and turn it straight back on. No worries. And they struggle, man. Not struggle, they can't do it. They find it absolutely impossible. Now, I'm not saying everyone has such a big problem. But I know some of you are probably thinking, this is all under control. I'm not addicted to my phone. But we live in a society which definitely does have this problem. So if the idea of turning your phone off for 2 hours is scary, maybe that's something you should consider practicing and building up towards. And maybe in Ramadan especially, because we're fasting, it's even more important to be able to, because if you're fasting from food and trying to control yourself, and instead of getting a dopamine hit by eating a biscuit or eating some fruit or from sugar, you're just going to get your dopamine and cortisol all to come from your phone instead, then you're not really fasting. Then you're just getting it from a different source. So I think it is important to bring that awareness to what it is that we're fasting from, and actually being aware of what information we allow to come in, and organizing that as well. Like, what are you learning about at the moment? What are you educating yourself about at the moment? On a daily basis, what do you learn about? What do you bring attention towards? And the reason that there's such a need for gratitude in the world at the moment, the reason that nearly everyone, without exception, needs to engage in gratitude practices, is because usually when you turn the news on, the question is, what's going wrong? How many people have died? Why do we need to panic? Why do we all need to go and hide in the bomb shelter? But when we flip it around and do a gratitude exercise, we say, instead of asking what's going wrong, why do we need to panic, we say what's going right and why do we need to smile. And why do we need to be happy? And when you ask those questions, then the whole chemistry in your brain, just by asking those questions, the chemistry in your brain will flip. So that's why I went on a bit longer on that rant than I expected, man. But I think just being aware of what information you allow into your brain, and the magical thing that does is it brings attention to what you're educating yourself on. Are you educating yourself at all? And if you are educating yourself, now you're going to have a list of what courses am I doing? How am I educating myself? How am I becoming a better human being? How am I becoming more educated? And that's always very, very important, man. And if as a result of that 15-minute lecture, you decide that you're going to do a gratitude course, which would be a very, very sensible thing to do indeed, what will happen, hopefully, if you're doing from a sensible gratitude course, you'll realize that you also consume oxygen. And I know some of you scientists out there will be like, you don't consume oxygen. The air is full of nitrogen and all these other things. I don't know what it is. I'm not a scientist. But basically, you're breathing. Yeah. So how do you take the air into your body and how do you take it out? Bringing awareness there is also very, very important. And when you do that, when you bring a bit of attention to your breath, for those of you that have been doing this, you'll realize that makes you more aware of your thoughts. And sometimes when your thoughts are on autopilot, just like, for example, if picking up your phone is on autopilot, some of your thoughts might be on autopilot. There'll be sometimes a very vicious cycle of thoughts which are on autopilot. And when you lose control, very often, like even though it's Ramadan and shaitan is locked up, but if before Ramadan shaitan had been working on you for 20 years to put your thoughts into a vicious cycle so that whenever something happens, you automatically have devilish thoughts. You don't need the devil to actually be there. Sometimes it actually becomes on autopilot. So taking time out to actually just stop for a little bit and just get a bit of clarity on what are we thinking about, what kind of thoughts go through our mind, and are they devilish thoughts or are they angelic thoughts? And just take some time to try and differentiate between what's actually going on just in our mind. And those last 3 points actually follow on quite nicely. I didn't actually realize this before. I realized that now. But you'd realize that if you're taking in too much negative information, you're going to end up like not focusing on how you're breathing, and most of the thoughts are going to be out of control, and they might be very devilish, most of them. But if you control what information comes in, if you start asking the right questions, and you start maybe breathing with a bit more consciousness, you become aware of the thoughts, and suddenly that this plan of shaitan just falls apart, because it just becomes naked, basically. It's clever, man. But yeah, man, that's why we should have awareness on our consumption. Gee, people, any questions? Wissam's here. Assalamu alaikum, Wissam. Nice to have you, man. I do appreciate the brothers on the camera, man, because when you nod your head and you're just there, it's nice, man. But man, good to have everyone here, man. And no question, Saleh is here. Assalamu alaikum, Saleh. How are you, man? Good to have you, brother Saleh. Saleh, are you there? I think he's got 4 girls, isn't he? 3 girls. It's easy to be distracted when you've got that many kids, isn't it? We'll let him off, man. Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, I understand, man. MashaAllah. Saleh, are you there? No? Inshallah. Okay, inshallah. He's organising the iftars for the... Oh, walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Is that Saleh, yeah? Yes, you're here. I was wondering whether you're here or not, man. MashaAllah. We were just... Yeah, I know, man. We all we all love Saleh, man. Alhamdulillah. Great work he's doing. Anyway, man. Oh, alhamdulillah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I know that. That's why I don't push people too much. I used to push everyone to turn their cameras on and everything. But I know some people are there with their wives and kids, so it's good to just keep the camera. But it's nice to know that you're there. But anyway, so no questions about that. Qasam, man. I just told you not to. Okay, well, shall we move on? So these are just... I wasn't meant to go that deep on the news, man, if I'm honest. But I was meant to talk more about food. So what happened yesterday is we spoke about food yesterday a little bit, and we brought that awareness to the iftar time a little bit. And I think from day one, we've been trying to bring that awareness to the first bite. And as an actual action plan for all of you guys today, definitely for the first bite, because just like we kind of were a bit unconscious of our thoughts and we're a bit unconscious of what's going on around us sometimes, we actually become a bit unconscious of even our food. Like we'll sit down to eat and we'll start eating and we'll finish the whole meal and we won't have even noticed what happened because I don't know, we go into eating mode. This is again an evolutionary kind of thing which happens. It's important, I guess, for human beings. There was a point when human beings, the human beings who, whenever they found food, if they kind of switched off and really quickly started eating, they'd be the ones who'd survive. And even like I mentioned before, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the environment around us, even nowadays, some of us were taught that because there's less food, we really need to finish our food and make sure that we focus on our food. But sometimes this attitude actually gets rid of the awareness of the food itself. And that's why I really do recommend for the iftar time that we get that fruit, we get those natural foods which have been created directly by Allah. And the reason that's important is because when you eat them, you'll get that awareness of what those foods actually do for your body, what they do for your esophagus, what they do for all of the different organs which are used for your digestion, how they affect your digestive system, and whether they put pressure on your digestive system or not. And then when you eat like samosas or rice or something which is cooked and drenched in oil, when you eat something like that, then you can just have that awareness of what that does for your digestive system. And when you get that awareness for yourself, not only will you realize what it does for your digestive system, for your physical body, but you'll realize what it does for your spiritual body as well, and your mind as well. Like you'll realize how it kind of clogs up your mind, or whether it clears your mind, so you can think like freely and cleverly, basically, or whether you think like a bit of an idiot. Same with your spirit. Are you aware of your spirit? So you're actually like in touch with how your spirit is connecting with Allah, or are you kind of a bit like, is it a bit foggy, your awareness of your spirit? So food basically affects your spirit. So that's very, very important. I think that was the point of this this exercise. Just on the second point on the slide, just like when we're reciting Quran, we have unconscious energy. I think we've covered that a few times. But in the same way, we also have unconscious energy sometimes when it comes to changing our diet. And obviously this would apply more to somebody whose diet is not in control, somebody whose food is kind of very cultural and decided kind of by whatever's cooked, or like if you decide what you're going to eat based on what's in front of you as opposed to by using your brain, then you will struggle with changing your diet. Does that make sense to everyone? So if you've decided based on what's around you, and you're not really making a decision to eat, you're kind of just like the same thing happens with the news, like, oh, because it's there we have to know it, and sometimes the same thing happens with food, that because it's there we have to eat it, as opposed to actually realizing that everything that we eat is actually a choice, and accepting that sometimes has unconscious energy around it. So when I say this, we'll be like, yeah, that's true, but, and that, then we'll have this excuse, and there'll be this whole like energy around what we eat sometimes, which will be like, yeah, I can change, but I can't change at the same time, and we give these excuses. So what I challenge everyone to do is just to become a bit more aware of your unconscious energy around your food decisions, and I think that will be really, really helpful, man. And then you'll notice how it kind of affects what goes on around you. And just to encapsulate, there's actually one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which I think is very important. It's actually very surprising because, like I mentioned, the main problem at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was still poverty. It was more common to not have food than to have too much food. Whereas nowadays, living here in the UK, the problem obviously is we have too much food as opposed to too less food. So this hadith is actually, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, this problem was addressed by the Prophet ﷺ, and this is probably one of the most famous hadith which we have in terms of eating too much. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, sorry, I put the Arabic again instead of the English. But I know those of you who are Arabic, you can challenge yourselves to figure it out. So, وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما ملأ آدمي, that no human being fills up fills up any kind of utensil. So no human fills up any kind of utensil. So we can take all of the cases of human beings filling up utensils. So sometimes we fill up, when the council give you those little bags to put waste food in, sometimes we fill that up. Sometimes we might fill up a container to put it in the fridge. Sometimes we might fill up a bag and put it in the freezer. But there's different types of ways which we store food. Sometimes we put it in our bellies. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Ma mala'a adamiyun wi'a'an sharram min batnin." The worst kind of utensil that somebody can fill up. We're talking about filling here, so pushing beyond what you need to eat and going to more than you need. Sharran min batnin. The worst kind of thing you can fill up is your belly, is your stomach. Yeah, so this is what the Prophet ﷺ brings attention to. So as soon as you get to a point where you've eaten enough, if you were to carry on and just fill up, like the food doesn't need to be eaten anymore. Yeah, you've now got enough food for your brain to function properly and for your spirit to function properly and for your body to function properly. In fact, you are now at a point that if you carry on eating, you're actually going to mess up your brain's function, your body function and your spirit function. So the Prophet ﷺ says, بِحَسْبِ ibn Adam لُقَيْمَاتٍ. In essence, for proper functioning, we know the Prophet ﷺ was probably the most optimal performer in terms of human being performance. I think it's a bit difficult to really get close to the performance of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of productivity, in terms of mind, body and spirit productivity. He says, بِحَسْبِ ibn Adam لُقَيْمَاتٍ. A few morsels is really what's enough for everyone. And if you look at the diet of the Prophet ﷺ, he, without even making a fuss. The weirdest thing is, the Prophet ﷺ, we have narrations that his house never had any food cooking in them. But the Prophet ﷺ himself wouldn't even mention it as if it's something worth talking about. Yeah, does that make sense? So these narrations, that when we hear the stories that the Prophet ﷺ didn't have food cooked in his house for 2-3 months in a row, or he would never have flour or anything like this, we don't actually ever hear it coming from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ. It's usually his wives or his companions just describing his state of affairs. Prophet ﷺ was like, that's how it should be. بِحَسْبِ ibn Adam لُقَيْمَاتٍ. A few morsels is really what it takes. يُقِمْنَ صُلْبَهُ. Just enough. يُقِمْنَ صُلْبَهُ, which keeps his back straight. So as opposed to kind of being in a state of hunger, you're having enough which actually keeps you going. And this is very, very important. So instead of, in our culture, we kind of have meals. So we have breakfast, lunch, dinner. And this is kind of the culture. This is what you do. Prophet ﷺ is flipping the whole equation. You're eating so that you can live. You don't stay alive. Like, eating is not the point of living. You eat so that you can stay alive. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مَحَالَةَ. However, the Prophet says, if you're the person who can't accept it straight away, if you're somebody who's already kind of addicted to food, has to eat a certain amount, then فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مَحَالَةَ. If you can't make do with a few morsels, then as a maximum, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. Then as a maximum, go to a third of your stomach. And obviously this is difficult to measure, but the Prophet ﷺ is saying that based on what usually completely fills you up and makes you feel like you've eaten too much, go to a third of what that is. So I think everyone knows what happens or where it is or how much food it takes to really fill us up so that we feel, I've eaten too much today. So the Prophet ﷺ says, don't go halfway there. Don't even go halfway there. Just go a third, so that you don't have that problem of having eaten too much and that food now messing up your spirit, messing up your mind, messing up your body. Keep it way behind that. And make sure وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ. You've got a third of your consumption is actually there for your liquids, for your water, basically. And وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. And therefore make sure you kept a third for actually being able to breathe comfortably as well. So that's quite a comprehensive hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where it kind of sums up some of the problems that we have in our society of people who like eating too much. And there's another hadith there at the bottom as well, which is where the Prophet ﷺ kind of talks about it on a much more spiritual level. There, in this first hadith, he's talking about it in terms of body and mind as well. In the third one, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Inna akthara nasi shiba'an fi dunya, aktharuhum ju'an yawm al-qiyamah." The Prophet ﷺ says, the people who eat the most in the world, the people who eat too much, and shiba'an, I want to translate that with justice actually. Shiba'an means to eat beyond how much you're meant to. Yeah, to overeat, I think is probably a nice translation. Yes, Wissam, I can see what Sam's thinking. He's making sure. Shiba'an, I guess, is overeating is a good translation there. So somebody who eats beyond how much you need to eat. Full, yeah. Okay, yeah. So being completely full. So the people who used to go full out in this world, they will be the people who will be the most hungry on the day of Qiyamah. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ describes people who because obviously as soon as you start eating too much or fill yourself up, then you're going to start being lazy in terms of what you can actually produce, what you can actually do, whether or not you can actually look after your spirit, whether or not you can actually look after your body, and obviously whether or not you can look after him. So I think the connotation there is quite obvious that if you eat too much, you're going to be lax in terms of your spirit. And I think we've covered what's on the slide now quite comprehensively. But there's a few more sayings which a lot of the scholars say. I think the first one is the first one there. Let me just put the mouse there. This is the first one, which is Hassan Basri, rahimahullah. He mentions, this might be Imam Shafi, one of the two. It might be Imam Shafi. Imam Shafi was one of the leading Imams of our time. He says that Ashib'u yuskilul badan, that when you eat too much, when you fill yourself up, when you overeat, you start burdening your body. وَيَزِيلُ الْفِتْنَةِ, and you start ruining your brain. وَيَجْلِبُ النَّوْمِ, يَجْلِبُ النَّوْمِ, you cause sleep to come upon yourself. You'll feel more sleepy. So this is it will destroy your body, it will destroy your mind, and also it will destroy your energy levels, it will destroy your energy reserve. So that's why it's very important to be aware of that, especially in Ramadan when we're trying to pray Taraweeh and trying to connect to Allah. When your energy levels are low, I mean, regardless of how many shaitans are locked up and how many angels are flying around you, you're basically not gonna be bothered. So that's why it's very, very important to have awareness of our consumption in Ramadan. Anyway, so that was just a few of the things. I think we've covered this slide, haven't we? Yeah, man. Yeah, so that was more to do with the mindset, if I'm honest. Sorry, I'm just going through the slides just to see where we are. Let's come on to some action points then. Yeah, we'll cover this. I think we might have to go a bit deeper on this tomorrow as well, just briefly, more in terms of nutrition, because I think there's a lack of education as well, sometimes in terms of nutrition as well. So we'll inshallah we'll finish this topic tomorrow. But just before we come on to we're nearly at the end anyway. But this slide which we've got now, which is the physical body houses the spirit. So the way that your physical body is, if you've built your physical body according to Sharia, according to the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, then obviously that physical body will be a good temple, will be a good kind of house for your spirit. But if you've kind of neglected your physical body, then you'll struggle to really be able to house your spirit in that way. And I think that's quite obvious. I think most of us will see that clearly in Ramadan. That's the beauty of Ramadan, isn't it? Like even with myself, like now it's Ramadan, I can notice a lot more easily like what kind of foods actually affect. My niece just came and opened the door and legged it. Oh, I can't even reach. But anyway, I'll leave it open. But in Ramadan, we notice like the effect of foods a bit because we've not eaten for like 16, 17 hours. Then suddenly we start eating stuff. I think even if you eat something, now before I'd never noticed that milk has a bad effect on me. If I'm honest, I noticed this recently. So I used to have protein shake with milk. Protein shake. I don't actually mean protein shake. I mean more a lot of other stuff. But that's a story for another day. But milk, like I actually felt how just by having it, I just felt like I couldn't be bothered to do anything after that. And some of my teachers had told me this as well, that the milk in this country is not very good. But that's a personal thing. I'm not like giving any fatwas on milk. You can carry on drinking your milk. But personally, I've noticed that it has a certain effect on my body. And I'm really glad because this Ramadan I've managed to, because I'm not eating. And then I'm praying Taraweeh. My dad's forcing me to pray Taraweeh, to lead him in Taraweeh, which means that I'm practicing Quran a lot. And then after that, I used to have milk, and then I just feel like I feel like vomiting sometimes. But anyway, man, so the Ramadan gives us that chance to get in touch with. So now you can eat to some extent for your mind and for your spirit to some extent as well. And you know how your food will actually get in touch with your spirit. So now, in terms of, we spoke about taqwa from two types. One is a mindset, and one is some action points which you take. So in terms of mindset, we've already spoken about. I think today's lesson was all about mindset, and how food will affect, and how the mindset that we have around food and the awareness that we have around food. So alhamdulillah, hopefully by being here for the past half an hour or however long you guys have been here, we've now got a slightly different awareness of how food affects our body, affects our spirit, affects our relationship with Allah. But we want to bring this heightened awareness to some actual action points as well. We don't just want to say, yay, now I know, but we actually want to change something about our life. So this hadith is actually beautiful, man. It was the first hadith that came to my mind, that's why I put it there. But when I went through it, the biggest nuance I just took now when I went through it was that the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't so much focus on not eating certain things, but he focuses on the things that you eat. Yuqimna sulbahu. It should actually you should eat to live, basically. Yeah. So the food that you're putting in your body should be the food which actually gives you the energy that you need. And I think that's actually very, 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 very powerful indeed. So based on the slide I've got now, which is sometimes, because the reason I say this is very often when we think of improving our health, sometimes we think I need to stop eating this, I need to stop eating this, I need to stop eating this. Well, okay, but that's not really what's always needed. Like we need to actually think about what do we need. What does my brain need for optimal performance, for example? There should be something you're eating to make sure your brain works properly. It's quite an important part of your body. The same with our heart. Like our heart's going to be pumping stuff around the body. So we should be thinking about like what is it that my heart needs to function properly. Then obviously there's different parts. There's the digestive system, which has loads of different intestines, like the pancreas and the small intestine, the big intestine, the stomach. And there's special things which help. Like there's certain things which helps the pancreas. For example, inulin is a very good thing for the pancreas. But there's different things which work for different parts of the body. So now if we focus on actually trying to eat something which helps the body function better, and we keep in mind what part of the body are we trying to enhance here with this food, then every time we eat we'll actually be so much more conscious of what it is we're putting inside. And there on the slide there's some examples of the brain, the heart, the eyes. Like there's some foods which make your vision better, the spirit, and hopefully Ramadan will allow all of us to figure that out. But I'm not going to tell you what food is good for the spirit, but you can try eating something and then trying to pray after eating that food and seeing whether you feel like it's easy to connect to Allah after eating 5 samosas or not. Digestive system, obviously there's a lot, I think the doctors might be better to comment here, I think. And then the muscles, obviously we need some kind of protein and there's other things which we need for the muscle, but that's just a brief overview. I'm not a nutritionalist, so I don't want to go too deep into it. We'll cover this a bit deeper tomorrow, inshallah. But just, bringing that awareness there, man. So yeah, man, it's nearly 7 o'clock. I think we'll leave it on this slide. So the direct action point for today is really that when we have our iftar, is to bring the awareness to bring that awareness towards our food that we have at iftar time. So today at iftar time, what are we going to eat, and how's that going to affect our body? Like what part of, which part of our body are we actually feeding, and why do we need that food that we're eating? And try and be a bit more specific. Like if there's, like for example, like some people might say, this is like that we're eating a keema samosa. So there's samosa and there's keema inside, so that's got protein. Now that might make sense to some people, but if you think about it, that's not actually very sensible at all, because the majority of it is not very good for you. You just got a little bit of a filling inside, and you're eating all these random things without any awareness. This is what I mean when I talk about unconsciousness around food when we eat it, because we're used to eating certain things. When somebody suggests the idea of kind of bringing awareness there, we find it difficult to actually say, okay, this food is not good for me. And obviously we all eat things. Like, I'm not pretending that I don't eat anything which is bad for me. We all eat things which are bad for us sometimes. Sometimes we don't have that awareness, but this is why we're all practicing this. This is why we have this practice, and we try and discuss it, think about it, and bring that awareness there. And then the more we do that, then obviously the more we'll be able to build a diet plan which actually works for our body, it works for our spirit, and it works for our mind. Is that okay, people? Inshallah, man. I think we'll leave it there, inshallah. It's 7 o'clock. I think some of you have to go and start. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, I think the problem we have in Ramadan is we do this thing where we try and make up for the time which we haven't eaten. So we start eating lots, and I think it's a cultural thing in some cultures. Definitely, I've seen it in some of the. Whilst I was imam in Colchester, I definitely saw it within some of the people there. Even whilst we were breaking fast at the mosque, that there was this idea of like we haven't eaten for 18 hours, and now we have to suddenly like start eating lots and lots so that we don't kind of die. Um, which is it might sound a bit funny when we speak about it like that, but unfortunately, in some cultures, it is actually the norm. So I think it's good to talk about it, and definitely brings a bit of awareness there. Jazakallah for that. Inshallah, man. 7 o'clock, man. Jazakallah for everyone being here, man. See you tomorrow, inshallah, man. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Any questions are welcome if you guys want to stick around. But it's nice to have you all, man. Wa alaikum assalam. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Wa alaikum assalam. Hamdan. Oh, wa alaikum assalam. So you're welcome, man. It's good to have you, man. Yes, yeah. Alhamdulillah, man. Alhamdulillah, man. You've been an inspiration in terms of how to look after your body sometimes, man. Jazakallah, man. Barakallah fiqh. Yeah. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, people, man. Assalamu alaikum. I think I'll end it there, man. If no one's got any questions. Assalamu alaikum. Good to have you all, man.